And now on the Ron Johnson Show, as promised, we have Kevin Seifert, insider for the Vikings, ESPN beat writer. You guys had Courtney Cronin earlier. You know who she is. She's now moved on to the team that sucks with the Bears. Sorry, just joking. They're okay. But we now have Kevin Seifert. He's a part of the championship mantra beginning of Kevin O'Connell. Kevin, welcome to the Ron Johnson Show. When you first walked onto campus and you start to kind of feel the aura, like Dave Chappelle being Rick James, you felt the aura of Kevin O'Connell around the building. What does it feel like around the building, just being around that staff of Kwesi and Kevin O'Connell and these new coaches? What is the vibe like around there?
I guess the best way to put it is it feels like the temperature has been brought down considerably in the building, whether it's the football side, the business side. I wasn't out there every day under the Zimmer Spielman regime, and it's not unusual for people who work together for a long time to start grading on each other, and for that sort of relationship to spur out throughout the building. And so by all accounts, it was a pretty tense place. It was a pretty joyless place there for a little while, and they very intentionally tried to create a different atmosphere, and they certainly hired two people, and I think Kwesi will have a lot to do with the culture as well as Kevin O'Connell. But they two people who are very different personalities from their predecessors, and so the immediate impact has been, I think people are a little looser. I think people are feeling a little bit more empowered and more ownership in the direction of the franchise. And you could say, well, that's what people always feel like in the beginning of a new regime. But I've been at places, and I'm sure, Ron, you've seen this as well, where the opposite is true. They hire people to kind of lay down the law and create a quasi-military situation that scares people into playing well and coaching well and doing everything else well. And those don't usually turn out too well, I don't think. And so this is that's my impression, is that the temperature is lowered. It's a looser place. Ultimately, it'll the success or failure may or may not have anything to do with that that sort of atmosphere, but that is certainly the first impression when you walk in the door or on the field.
Yeah, and the players. I mean, when you see them at practice now, you can kind of see it's a different era. I mean, when I played, we didn't have social media. We didn't have a social media team. Now you can see, even on social media, the players' personalities maybe being a little bit more loose. Guys having a little bit more fun at practice. And again, like you said, it's different. It's like going from McDonald's to Burger King. It's the same thing. It's just different. If you eat McDonald's every single day, and all of a sudden you're like, oh man, it's nothing's getting different, nothing's better. And then you get Burger King, you're like, oh man, this is a little bit different. Or Chick-fil-A, So I think that's what it is. It's different. As this difference take place, because Kwesi said something to me that I thought was powerful. He said, yeah, we can change the culture, but does that equate to wins? What does that mean for Kevin O'Connell? And what can this team do from day one? Like, first game, preseason's done, they've made the roster. What can be different as far as equating wins on the field that maybe Mike Zimmer didn't truly understand when you think about the offense versus the defense standpoint of this team?
Yeah, and really that's what they've done, because when you look at the roster and you look at sort of the makeup of the team and the moves they made in the offseason, they didn't blow anything up. They're basically – there's some changes, but for the most part, it's the guys they had last year in the key positions that they're hoping can lead them. I'm sure you guys have talked a lot about that, and I think so that puts the pressure on the coach and the coaching staff. Like that, the implication is that with a different set of eyes and a different approach and a different strategy, that's what will be the difference between an 8-9 team and a 10-7 team, or 11 6 team, or what have you, that makes the playoffs. And so I think the big thing will be, can they sort of execute a shift in the identity of what makes the Vikings win? Because throughout the Zimmer era, no matter what the quarterback stats were, the idea was that defense and running game were going to be the things that led them to victory. That's how they built the teams. That's how they coached and called plays for the most part. And that, I don't think, is what, the general assumption that around the NFL about how you win is anymore. And so O'Connell sort of personifies the idea that be aggressive passing early on. You're going to have a running game, but you're going to take advantage of all the NFL rules that are set up for you to be able to throw the ball better than the defense can defend you on doing it. With the quarterback and the receivers they have and the running backs, out of the backfield that they have and the skill players, they're set up to be able to do that. And so what can he do, right out of the bat is set the tone that say, here, we're going to win. The Vikings are going to win because the offense is going to hold the ball and score a lot of points. And it sounds simple, but that was not very consistent over time in the sort of the last few years of the previous era. And so it doesn't sound complicated, and it's not. It's just a matter of can they make that shift early on in the season in order to hit the ground running.
Yeah, and I've talked to a few current players. I've talked to a few former players, and you hit the nail on the head with the offense. I mean, I've had players tell me they felt like the offense was second fiddle. We have players on record on TV saying, they didn't interact with Mike Zimmer because they were on the offensive side of the ball.
Yeah.
Like, hey, I haven't seen Mike Zimmer in, X amount of days. Like, I saw him at practice, but that's it. Like, I don't see him in the building. He doesn't come to my meetings. So I think that is going to be a big different focus where you're going to see Kevin O'Connell, of course, in all the offensive meetings, with the position groups of the offense, because that's his thing. Defensively, I think defensive guys don't care about their head coach being around. They know their job. We got to stop the other team. They don't need to be coddled, handheld. It's just a different mindset on defense than it is on offense. Defensive guys are assassins. Offensive guys are prima donnas. It's different. And I was one. I know. I want coach to tell me I'm good. Like, come talk to me. Tell me what I need to do to get better.
Yeah.
So when you think about this offense, Kirk Cousins, Kevin O'Connell saw he's seen Kirk Cousins before, but he's seen Matthew Stafford operate. He's seen what a Super Bowl quarterback looks like. Kirk Cousins gets disrespected. He's the Rodney Dangerfield of the NFL, I feel like. If you think about Kirk Cousins, what does he need to do this season to get some respect? Like, what does he have to do to really say, you know what, I'm a good quarterback. My coach has never really trusted in me.
Whether it's fair or not, from a national reputation and even maybe locally to some extent, they'll either need to be, they have that Monday night game in week 2, where the whole country will be watching. I think it's week 2 against the Eagles, where the whole country will be watching, and we all know what the narrative is with him in primetime games. If they end up being in a lot of close games, how does he play in the fourth quarter of those close games? Because we know that he can make all the throws. We know that he can compile some pretty good stats, and that he'll find the Justin Jeffersons and the Adam Thielens. He understands that those are the guys that he needs to go to. But in those situations where when you have a good quarterback and you want him to become great, those are the times that he needs to do that. When the entire country's watching him, and in close games, or the other side of that is they need to maximize the good and not try to push him to be the great, if that makes sense. There are a lot of things that we've seen him do very well over the years, whether it's throwing to tight ends or running bootleg, like doing the bootleg passes, or operating in certain schemes that he's shown on tape against NFL defenses he can be very good at. So are they going to try to maximize those things, or are they going to try to push him into new directions in hopes of turning, like I said, what is already a good quarterback into a top 10 type guy? And so I don't know what the answer to that is. It sounds like from what was being said in the spring that they're going to, at least from a adjustments and on the line standpoint, they're going to expect him to be a veteran, smart quarterback who can read the look and get the team into the right play. That has not always been the case, as he's talked about and other people have talked about. But those are the things that I'll be watching. The extent to which they put play calling or play adjusting responsibilities on his shoulder on the field during games, and the extent to which he plays well in those crucial times that take you from good to great.
And last one for Kevin Seifert, ESPN Insider. There's some names on the market that have been tied to the Vikings that possibly could come back? Because we know everybody now is just biding their time, waiting for that first week of training camp to see, one, who gets hurt. What's the salary cap situation look like? Are there other guys out there to get cut in the first early days? You got Anthony Barr, Dominican Sue, Linval Joseph put an Instagram video out at the Vikings facility, and then Kyle Rudolph. Of those four, who's most likely to be a Viking by week 1 or 2?
Well, yeah, I guess part of it depends on are they real? How much are they going to be in this 3-4 defense? Because the Ndamukong Suh thing has been interesting, just because he's a big personality, but he's always been a 3-technique tackle. And if you're wanting to turn him into a guy that you bring in passing situations when you go to 4 down linemen, then that makes sense. If you're planning to play him on first down and you're 3-4. I don't know if he's the nose tackle that you want there. That has not been what he's done for a good part or all of his career. So I guess that name is interesting if they wanted to use him as a kind of a guy to bring off the bench in passing situations. Linval Joseph, being the straight nose tackle, if Dalvin Tomlinson is healthy, I'm not sure that I see that. So, the Suh thing is interesting to me. And I think that's one to keep an eye on, especially as we see how the scheme actually evolves. Teams are very rarely in their base defense from a percentage standpoint. And so even if they're saying they're playing a 3-4 and they are playing a 3-4, I don't know how often they'll be in that alignment.
Mm-hmm. And then what about Kyle Rudolph or Anthony Barr?
I think it sounded like the Barr thing has moved on, unless something has changed this summer. They, from a physical standpoint and also just the scheme standpoint, I'm not sure if this regime saw fit. I know Kwesi has talked to him and there's a personal mutual respect there, but in terms of, whether there's a fit on the field, I don't know that that's the case. And Kyle Rudolph, that it makes a lot of sense. I think they want to give Irv Smith as wide of a runway as they can give him to be as dominant a 3-down tight end as he can be. Potentially once you get to training camp and you see what the depth is behind him, that's a possibility. But that's probably another one where I don't know that there's any urgency and it might require some kind of injury for that to happen.